So hi, Casey.
So we're just leaving the expo floor now. We're heading over to this session. Our CEO, Niko Kivioja, is on stage right now. He's going to be talking with the other panelists about retail and hospitality companies working with farming. Should be very interesting. There's some of what he has to say, and of course, how his opinion differs from the other panelists.
Okay. Should we go a little further in the front to hear a bit better?
These guys will turn you on to a lot of cool things. It's a really pleasure to have you guys here. Have a good time.
Awesome, Jim. Thanks for the introduction. And definitely want to echo the connections you made here. This is, I think, my fifth one. And stick with me for life. Friends for life. Definitely some of these panelists have been there for a long time, so it's great to hear. And definitely, I'm sure people here who are here for their first time, they're going to make those connections. And we look forward to having you back for many years to come. This is a great conference to be at. But let's get ourselves introduced, guys. My name's Andrew Blume, as Jim said. I work for a company called Ironox, where we operate farms in Northern California as well as in Texas. We use a lot of robots to help us run those greenhouses. But before I was at Ironox, I had a startup called In-House Produce, where I was growing food on location in restaurants and in with celebrity chefs and in hotels as well. And so that's what we're here to talk about today, is on-location growing in farming, in grocery stores, hotels, and in restaurants. And we've got a great group of panelists here, as Jim introduced. And let's just start off with each of you kind of telling us a little bit about the who, what, where, when, of who you are, where your company operates, how long you've been in business, and just some of those basics about your companies. So, Alex, you're closest to me. Maybe you'll go first.
Thanks, Andrew, and great to see everyone here. So my name's Alexander Olesen, the co-founder and CEO of Babylon Microfarms. We're an on-site vertical farming platform delivering hyper-local ingredients at scale through on-site vertical farms. So we are headquartered in Richmond, Virginia, and we have farms coast to coast now. That's about it.
And what do you grow?
So we do a range of crops, so it's all hydroponic. We grow mostly fresh herbs, leafy greens, some microgreens and flowers.
What about you? What do you grow, Andrew?
We grow mushrooms. So I'm Andrew Carter, a co-founder and CEO of Smallhold. We're, again, a mushroom production. We have a few different formats that we grow in. Some are on-site productions that you can find in various Whole Foods and restaurants and central markets in Texas. And then we also have larger facilities. We call them macro farms, but big warehouse farms growing certified organic, locally grown mushrooms. We have one in New York, two in Texas, and we're building out Los Angeles right now. So happy to talk about mushrooms, but also excited to talk about all the the opportunities with on-site production. It's very cool stuff.
Niko?
Yeah, sure. Thanks. So we are not operators, as most of you guys are operating the farms. Netled is a company specialized in technology, and we have our clients and operators that are operating the farms, actually making business out of our technology and the benefits of that technology. So we've done all the scales. So we've done home growing systems a long time ago. Then we've done the cabinet stalls for in-stores. We've done automated in-store growing lines with the gutters and things like that. And now we are building, mostly we are building industrial scale farms in Scandinavia mainly. So about 3 million heads annually, herbs mostly, but also lettuce production lines, head lettuces mainly. And background of myself is in greenhouse. So my family greenhouse started back in the 80s to produce about 1 million kilos, which is 2 million pounds or so, of tomatoes year-round with artificial lighting, which was quite advanced back in the early 90s. And then we moved on to technology side and in the mid-2000. And we sold off the farm, and now we're focusing fully on providing turnkey automated vertical farming technology for leafy greens. Thanks.
Awesome. Thanks, everyone. So you all have raised a lot of money or gotten a lot of clients, and I want to hear a little bit of what's the pitch? Why your business? Why decentralized agriculture? And
how does this play into the future of our industry?
I guess it's important to talk about the industry as a spectrum, right? Today, there's a lot of focus on greenhouses, plant factories, and large commercial scale operations. But a lot of people that want to have access to fresh produce don't have the means or the resources to invest in one of those large scale farms. So on-site turnkey farms, like what we produce, like what Smallhold produces, are an opportunity for those retailers, food service operations, and communities to have access to indoor vertical farming, and with it the sustainable produce. So in many ways it represents the next wave of this industry, whereby small turnkey systems remove the barriers to entry and it ultimately enable the market to grow.
Andrew?
Yeah, I mean, that makes sense. I think that we fall into that as well, though with mushrooms in particular, one of the huge benefits is being having a mushroom that you're consuming it right after harvest. Most mushrooms, they're not a problem if you eat an old mushroom. Most people are actually eating old mushrooms all the time. But once you experience a mushroom that was harvested within 24 hours, it's a whole different experience, especially with specialty mushrooms. There's a reason that everyone eats button mushrooms in the United States. It's mainly because of the distribution network that exists. And so by growing as close as possible to the consumer, you can grow exciting mushrooms, you can grow them with less packaging, you can show people what mushrooms look like when they're growing, and you can convert people to be mushroom people, which is what we really want to do. And I think that, once you see these in person and you can see not only the efficiency in what can grow out of these, but also just the experience from a consumer standpoint, it makes a lot of sense. It's kind of hard to imagine conceptually, but if you're talking about investors or partners, once they see it, it's pretty straightforward for them. I think it excites a lot of people. So it's more it's important to just get it out there and get people to visit and see it, rather than just talking about it conceptually.
Converting people to mushroom people, so they're your mycelium.
Yes, exactly.
And Niko, what differentiates Netled, or kind of how do you pitch your company?
Yeah, so I would see us a comprehensive technology partner for our clients. So we are offering a package of technology, services, and growing method that we can give competitive advantage to our clients to make sure that they can thrive in that business. And why we are offering this extensive package of benefits to our client, the main reason is that most of the clients are coming from different businesses, not necessarily from growing field, and they most likely don't have an understanding, probably not the growing itself, but also the packaging, what sort of materials you should use for the packaging, how you design all the flows in the factories, and what are the meaningful things to take note on when you're selling to retailers and consumers. So we are helping these investors or funds or food industry operators to come to the vertical farming field by offering all the expertise they need, but we are strictly limiting ourselves, staying out of the actual operating of the farms, because that's something we cannot offer added value. We don't know how the markets work in the States or certain towns, but we know that the technology can supply this amount of crops and this amount of quality and these crops, and then the operator can build the business model from that point on. So that's in brief what we do.
So that kind of makes me wonder, you guys as operators, Andrew and Alex, when Niko was talking about packaging and thinking through how this is a little different than centralized growing, how do you guys actually run that operation so that you're getting your food to either the chef or to the retailer in the package, and how do you quality control that and maintain the operations? Because that's something very different than a centralized farm that maybe has equipment or the ability to kind of really control that at one centralized location.
So I guess for us, firstly, we're not operators. Our core competency is a remote management service. So that is the combination of turnkey vertical farming hardware with remote management. So we're able to control the farms through the cloud and provide a service to the end operator. And so in most cases for us, that's food service locations, whether it's higher ed, senior living, healthcare, that kind of thing. And so in those cases, we're basically hand-holding them. So we're training them through alerts, through a lot of software touches, how to be successful with the farm. and then ensuring that through various data collection methods that we are able to ensure food safety, scheduling and so forth to ultimately make them successful growers. So we're actually not responsible for the packaging, but we try and make sure that they have all the resources they need to be successful.
Yeah, we're very much an operator. When we started, we were only doing these on-site productions, and so we spent a lot of time working on probably similar kinds of stuff, like it's a lot of climate control. We have our own patents on all of the hardware and software that are inside of these units that you can find in various restaurants and grocery stores. And we tried to get a lot of people to do it themselves for a while, but we found that people kind of gave up, or the quality wasn't where we wanted it. And so we started offering our own service. And so most of our customers have a service from our team. We still have to have remote management because we don't want to be visiting it every day. It's only once a week, if even that. Then we also, all of our farms are actually under our organic certification. And so we manage all the certifications as well for everyone. When you have a mini farm from us, you don't get a packaged product. It's all loose mushrooms. And so any of the grocery stores that have our installations, those mushrooms are harvested and then put in a pile, usually, hopefully in refrigeration, but people can buy it by the pound. When people get a packaged product from Smallhold, which are in a lot of stores now, those are from more centralized locations that have an adaptation of our technology, but way larger scale, way more efficiencies of scale. It's more similar to a commercial facility, but obviously there's some differences there too, because what we're trying to do is a little more innovative than the general mushroom industry.
Yeah, I think it's really interesting, the distinction between operator and remote management. When I had in-house produce in LA, we were driving around LA to go and try and service these farms, and I'd be sitting in traffic if I get a text, I got to get across LA, across town, and check on this garden and see what's going on with it. I wonder, Andrew, how do you overcome, some of those, like if you get that call, how do you overcome that? Because if you're decentralized, you don't necessarily have a person there to put out a fire.
Yeah, I mean, for us, it's like we're very selective on where these things go. And so they're only in places that we already have a larger facility, we have a team, we have kind of a setup. And so these are not in the middle of nowhere where we don't have our own way of servicing these things. There's a lot of reasoning behind that, also because it's plugged into our own supply chain. Like we want to be, like we provide substrates, we provide services. It's a lot more than just putting seeds in a unit. Like mushrooms require it's a different kind of management. And so they have to be part of the larger facilities that are somewhere in the area of these things. Nonetheless, there are still, there's tons of issues. I mean, when we were starting out, crazy stuff. Like we have this installation that's not there anymore, but I got an alert from the system that the power was out, and it was like freezing or something outside, and I drove over. At that point, it was like four of us. And I climbed up, it was like above a bar, and the chef hired someone to plug in a fire escape sign, because the fire department was coming by, and they ripped out our wires and plugged in. It was crazy, absolutely crazy. And it was also kind of New York City, I guess, is that people just figure it out. And so, you put out fire. Luckily there's no literal fire there, but you figure it out. But the automation and the remote control really helps with that, where if there's a serious problem or if it's something that you can kind of deal with later.
Yeah, and that kind of brings up the flip side, Alex. How do you rely on your food service partners? They're your customer, but at the same time, every hydroponic installation I've ever grown on needs to be cleaned at some point, right? So how do you rely on a customer to do that level of maintenance and ensure that the quality of the produce and the quality of the unit remains strong when, there's always the adage, the customer is always right. You can't really boss around your customers only so much, right?
Almost always right. Yeah, so I think for us, we've solved very different problems to that of a commercial grower. So we've miniaturized some of the same semi-automation you'd see in a large-scale plant factory. We've combined that with a back-end software platform that allows us to basically visualize all of our farm fleet at any one time. And then we've integrated new layers and redundancies around food safety, around cleaning. So we have sensors that are not typical to your average grow system that allow us to get ahead of customer actions and ensure their long-term compliance with the goals, and also ensure that the crops are healthy. So through that, we've seen our KPIs tracking up consistently as we're able to basically dial in on the data for different crop types and ensure that they're successful in the long run.
And how many systems do you each have for these on location, in grocery stores, in restaurants? How many systems of these have you guys built, and how many are you building in the next year?
So we have 75 farms installed from coast to coast, and we have another 40 odd back ordered.
Cool. We got about 20 of the mini farms out there, and then we're installing about 10 more in Texas coming up right now.
We have 10 farms from 100,000 heads up, so medium and big size farms, and additionally some smaller farms.
Awesome, guys. Yeah, so what's the most rewarding part of all this, right? We all love what we do, but you guys are founders of your companies. So what's the most rewarding part? What makes you guys smile the most about the work you do? Niko, maybe you want to go first?
Well, yeah, what is the most rewarding thing? It's of course when the customer is happy and the technology, everything works well, and yeah, that's because it's very important for me that the customer is happy on the technology. I'm a tech guy, I'm not so much of a grower guy. So how can I make sure that all these technologies are up to the date and make sure that there is no, let's say, surprises to anybody, and if there is any problem with the client, I take that personally. So when there's no issues, then I smile.
Awesome.
I mean, I love mushrooms so much because people get obsessed with them, like crazy obsessed. We're at Indoor AgCon, so I'm sure there's a lot of plant obsessed people, but I don't know many like lettuce societies, no offense to anyone, but there's tons of mycological societies, and when you show someone a mushroom that is growing, like easily 1 or 2 out of 10 people become obsessed with mushrooms, like crazy obsessed. Watch all the movies, read all the books, their life has changed, and I love growing mushrooms and doing it in front of people because it really does that in a different way than anything I've ever seen.
Yeah, I think for us, like, it's the opportunity to educate and inspire people around the food that they eat. Like, so many people are completely detached from the food that they consume, and so by putting the farm right there, allowing them to watch it grow, the plants grow quick enough that if you leave it for a day or two, you come back, you can notably see the difference. And hearing the stories from our clients about how they never knew, the herb tasted that good when it was fresh, or the lettuce tasted so good, I think that keeps us going. And especially when we put them in like K-12 schools, like things like that, it's inspiring to watch people get involved with vertical farming this way.
Yeah, absolutely. And just for me, when I was at In-House Produce, the most rewarding thing was when you'd have your garden there in the restaurant or the hotel, and you'd see people come with their kids or their grandkids, and they'd show them the garden, and they'd look at it, and it was just like, wow, like you're opening people's eyes to it. So it's pretty exciting to see that reaction. I'm sure that's been a great one for you guys as well. So let's look further out in the future. Let's imagine it's 2030. Where do you see your company going? Where do you see this sector of decentralized growing and on location growing? Is it going to be, just what's your vision? Where do you want to be in 10 years?
Take a first stab at this. So as in for us, if you look at the progress we've made in 5 years in business, we're now letting data drive all of our decisions. We're seeing, we're eliminating issues that we didn't think were possible a couple of years ago, and we're delivering a highly effective indoor farming experience to farms across the country, coast to coast. So in 10 years time, I could see us having a network of farms globally in the tens of thousands of unit range. And I think for us now, it's just a question of cost engineering, driving down the cost of the units and increasing our volume so that we can install more of these units around the world.
Yeah, I mean, for Smallhold, it's all about creating this network effect of all of the mushroom farms that we have. These on-site productions aren't the only thing we do. We have these larger facilities as well, and we want to be able to provide a local product wherever you are. Creating a national brand with local food is a new thing. A lot of people here are trying to figure it out, but there's not a whole lot of history about this actually working for anyone. And the idea that someone in Washington or Wisconsin or New York can go and get a Smallhold product and trust that not only is it local, but it is organic and everyone's paid a livable wage and all these things that people care about that you know from the brand that you're familiar with in one place, you get it somewhere else. That's what we want. We want to be a big brand, a big company, but providing this product that is normally only allowed for, smaller, more regional productions. And I think it's important to be doing stuff in front of people, to be doing stuff in warehouses. There's all sorts of different applications of growing technology, not only for mushrooms, and I think all of it's important. So I don't think there's one way to do any of this. And in 10 years, it's going to be a patchwork of all of it. It's pretty exciting stuff.
Awesome. Niko?
Yeah, I agree that there's value to show consumers how the plants are grown because of this detachment between the consumers and the, let's say, how food is produced altogether. And I think that the transformation from conventional farming to vertical farming altogether is a question of what makes sense in the long term. Currently, there is definitely big business and a high trend of growing in stores, growing hyper-locally, if I may. Then again, the other end of that spectrum is the huge units like greenhouses, tens of hectares or hundreds of acres. What's the unit you use here? But then it means that you have to be very far away from the consumers to actually have that economic scale. I think the eventual truth is somewhere in between. So it's going to be smaller than current, let's say, big scale greenhouses. But majority of the products are most likely being produced with medium-sized, let's say, millions of heads annually sized farms, where you can actually minimize the logistical length, the food mileage, and so on. And our philosophy with the technology development is that if we really want to drive the change from conventional farming to vertical farming, we have to be competitive with the pricing of the conventional farms, because at the end of the day, consumers may be willing to pay additional premium price for a while to buy the stuff that is grown right next door. But then again, in the long term, most of the consumers are always choosing the cheapest stuff. And to actually do the change, then we have to be competitive with conventional farming. And that's why we are doing all of these scales to find which scale is actually the most optimum for the economical perspective. And having said that, I believe that the small farms, the cabinets, which we are actually also doing, so we have cabinets in supermarkets in Scandinavia, and we are showing the consumers that this is the way that we are producing these crops, and then we have piles of vertical farmed crops right next to that this you can buy, it's grown with this method, but the cabinet function mainly is marketing tool for us.
Yeah, I think it's really interesting to hear this push and pull between centralized agriculture and maybe this smaller, local, more artisanal agriculture. And maybe some people think that's bipolar, you're one or the other, but what it sounds like I'm hearing from this group is it's a patchwork of all of them, and the future isn't necessarily so cut and dry with, one or the other. Do any of you think that's provocative, or it sounds like you all agree with that?
I think that that's the way it has to be. I mean, it's agriculture's never worked like that, where you have one solution for everyone. And I know we all want that, where you can say that this is the greenhouse that you use and this is the type of hydroponics you want, but it's not. I think that we all need to kind of like break free of that and then realize that we all just need to work together for this larger system that we need to. It's a larger agriculture system that we need to change.
I'd echo that and say, ultimately you've got to find your niche, double down on it, and be the best product and service within that lane. And if you want to leverage those learnings to enter other lanes down the line, that's one thing. But right now, I think everyone's still trying to find what they're best at and excel at it.
Awesome, guys. So given that we're talking about on-location growing in hospitality industry, I got to ask the COVID question, because that was all shut down for a while, and it's in fact why I shuttered it in-house produce. Is we looked at our market and we saw, hey, our customers are all going out of business. How did you guys survive that? What pivots did you do? How did you navigate that incredibly difficult time?
So for us, as in, it was difficult for everyone. Things certainly slowed down. We were fortunate that by focusing on institutional clients, primarily in healthcare and higher education, we avoided a lot of the fallout from restaurant closures, things like that. So after the initial slowdown, we've seen kind of a rapid bounce back of the market. You know, as have a lot of people, right? There's never been a greater moment for hyper-local food production and you know, supply chain resiliency. So we're riding a bit of a wave from that at the moment.
Yeah, it was crazy. It's crazy for everyone, and it still is kind of crazy. But we were like a team of 12 with talking to grocery stores about installations, but also mushrooms from larger facilities, but mainly dealing with restaurants. And in New York, you know, it completely went on pause. All the grocery stores we were talking to stopped talking to us for a little while, and we freaked out. But we just kind of really went for it. We started doing a home delivery service for our mushrooms. We help people grow at home during COVID, which turned into this big quarantine trend, doing grow kits. Now it's kind of like an add-on sort of marketing initiative, but we're one of the biggest grow kit companies in the country, which is kind of cool. But we, when about halfway through 2020, there was basically all these grocery stores started realizing that the mushroom trend was really happening. Like, the mushrooms were one of the highest increasing products in the grocery store. All the produce saw a huge bump, but the bump in mushrooms was unlike anything else. And they were all talking to us, realizing that we were offering something they wanted, like mushrooms, certified organic, local, packed in sustainable, compostable clamshells. And so they all kind of came out of the woodworks and asked us to build facilities as fast as possible. And so, you know, we really went for it. You know, we're almost a team of 100 now. We are in almost 300 stores. And so it's like, COVID is horrible, and I want it to be over. But it definitely, you know, was a moment where Smallhold really grew. And so I'm grateful for that growth. But obviously, you know, I think that we all want this to be over so we can even grow even faster.
Yeah.
Well, for us, of course, the first few months were really scary when we saw that all the clients told us that, okay, we are going to delay the investments, and we don't really know what happens. The financing for farms for a few months in the beginning of the COVID situation was really tricky. There was a lot of hesitancy with the investors and so on. But it only took maybe 1-2 months after the initial shock that we started seeing lots of leads coming in, inquiries about farms, and quickly after it followed with a lot of orders. So the order book started to fill up. And why this takes place, I think once the planes were grounded and the ships were stopped at ports, they realized that, okay, there's no global food supply chain anymore. Just there isn't a way to get this stuff shipped across the world. So a lot of states actually at least started to talk about, very few actually had time to realize the subsidies and incentives for companies to go to invest in local produce, but still this made a lot of impact on a lot of inquiries. That a lot of companies were getting indications from the states that, okay, please move forward and study this field, and you're going to get a lot of money to invest in vertical farming, local production. And yeah, I think that was one of the main drivers why there was actually quite sudden increase in this activity.
Awesome. Well, I could ask you guys questions all day, but I kind of want to hear questions from the audience. And actually, I see my friend Mary in the audience, and I know you got a great business that does decentralized growing as well. So I'm kind of curious to hear your thoughts on the panel. If you have any questions, or just tell a little bit about Green Food Solutions, and maybe you want to come up here and grab a microphone, or do we have one? Oh, we got one to pass around. So Mary over there. I'm calling on her first, and then we'll take it from there. And feel welcome to plug your business here.
Thank you, Andrew. No, really, thank you. So my name is Mary Wetherill. I'm the CEO and co-founder of Green Food Solutions. What we do, like these amazing gentlemen up there, basically we help start farms for people who are looking to start farm businesses. So we don't sell food, but we help people start farms. So we install, we maintain, and we offer a training service to help people succeed in their farming processes. So we do this mostly with residential and commercial spaces. So when you're speaking about COVID and some of the things that were going on in the pandemic, really one of the things that stood out for our customers was the fact that people actually didn't have to go to the grocery store, that they were having farms in the resident buildings where they lived. And what we do primarily is work with the developers and show them how this actually works for them financially. We have them in retail spaces, helping them monetize these spaces that have gone, barren in many, many cities. We're doing this as far as Tokyo. We're doing this in our area, in the tri-state area, in New York and New Jersey. But mostly, like you, our mission is to empower what we call a new local food system, completely eliminating the distribution of food and having it where you live, where you work. We're working right now with developers in Japan that are going to be putting them in train systems. The Japanese population travels a lot and commutes in train systems. So our vision is literally to see cities flooded with farms, every building having a farm in it. And what we do is we show how that works economically. We help connect farmers with real estate. So farmers who are looking to start small businesses and how to be successful, we just basically are a support company in that way. We help you start the farm in the physical realm, your lights, your equipment, and all of that. But the training is truly what I think has distinguished and helped our customers out.
Awesome, Mary. Yeah, and one piece of advice: be careful with the word flooding of a restaurant, or flooding cities, because I've flooded restaurants before with my garden. I had it on a float valve, and that float valve got stuck, and chef calls me up and is like, "Oh, geez, you better come on down here." So be careful with that. But I was thinking, actually, when you were saying on a train, it's like, how do you keep the water from splashing all over if that train's starting and stopping? That sounds a little wild to me.
So it's not in the trains, it's actually in the train system. So imagine it like when you have Penn Station or, in New York, or, huge transportation hubs. Yeah. We have them in airports. In Chicago O'Hare Airport, we have a farm. And originally, that particular system was meeting sustainability goals of the company of that airport. But in the end, it really showed them that, food who's supplying the restaurants inside the airport, all that food has to go through TSA like you and me. And so the labor cost associated with that completely went away by having that food produced on site. So we show our customers really how this works economically.
Awesome. Thank you, Mary. Just called on her out of the blue, so appreciate you stepping up. Now, does anyone else have any questions from the audience? We got one right over there.
Thank you. So actually, Mary, you started to cover this. My question, I've worked with grocers in another capacity for a number of years, and I'm moving into this space. This is probably the most interesting hour for me at Indoor AgCon among many so far. So many interesting hours, but this is really interesting for me. I'm wondering about the in-store installation economics. You just mentioned that you show how the economics work, but I also know that grocers, and I think you mentioned marketing is often the aspect of this, don't necessarily put price or economic performance of the in-store installation as the first priority. Is that accurate? A, B, how do your systems work on the economic side? Good question.
Yeah, what are your business models? Like, how do you monetize? Do you sell produce, or do you sell like a service? How does that work?
Yeah, I can start. We've tried all sorts of different ways of doing this. And again, it's not our core business. It was for a little bit in the beginning, but because it's not our core business, we have a little bit more flexibility. How we look at this with retailers is usually we try to place them in places that we know are going to sell a lot of mushrooms. And so, but it's not only, the goal is to actually get into a lot more stores. And so you're in a couple Whole Foods, but we're in the entire region, plus multiple other regions. And we're in Central Market, for example, but we're also in a bunch of HEBs that don't necessarily justify having one of these installations. Most of the time, they do try to make sense with the economics, at least with us. Like, we sell them a price per pound, and then they're adding a margin to that, whatever that margin is. we've tried to charge them separately for service. Sometimes that works, sometimes it doesn't, depends who you're talking to. That only, in our experience, only really works if you end up bringing in like a different department, like the buildings people. They have a different budget, and so they can actually go and pay for servicing of equipment, kind of like whoever services the refrigerator. That's not really in the price of the tomatoes, for example. But it's kind of a case-by-case basis. I wish it was the same for everyone, but it's not. It gets even more complicated when you bring in like innovations people. There's now a lot of people looking at ESG goals and how much money they're going to be investing in all sorts of stuff, and they can actually offset a lot of your price because they're going to be investing millions of dollars in different things anyway. And if you check a few boxes off that from different initiatives with the retailer, then they get kind of excited about that. But again, it's, at least for us, it's not the same for everyone. I wish it was, but we haven't figured that one out yet.
For the projects we've been involved in store field, like building farms inside supermarkets, it's usually based on some sort of cost distribution between the store owner and the farm itself. So to actually make it stand financially on its own, I think it's possible. With competitive pricing, it's going to be very tricky, and usually it means that you have to have the economy of scale, and you have to build productivity up to have that economy of scale. But then it means that it's difficult to sell all of that crops in one location. So we've seen these cases where the farm itself produces too much for the store to sell, and then they have to have partners to take that extra product, like restaurants and so on. So it's challenging to make the finances work, but I would say that it's doable. But I would say that the main driver, at least in Scandinavia, for these things is to have get the consumers come to the supermarkets because they have this system, and then the finances needs to be figured out accordingly.
Alex, you knew that economics and business model.
Yes, so for us, we sell the units outright. Our customers can choose to finance them, and then we have a 36-month service agreement, which includes a subscription of seeds, nutrients, supplies, and all of the remote management software and service that we provide. And that the contract essentially amounts to a fixed offtake agreement, so they know that they're going to get a set amount of produce out of the farm per month at a fixed price. And so we typically sell to food service operators where that works. Retail is kind of a next wave for us that we haven't dived into because of the complications around unit economics. And typically in retail, we see combinations where they're able to use front of house display units with kind of back of house production being the most effective way to grab customers' attention and then also get the volume that they need to make it profitable.
Do your customers pay for energy that your farms use, or do you guys pay for the energy and water?
Our customers pay for all the utilities. Yeah, our customers do too.
Do they try and get creative to say, hey, this is going to cost us $5 a month in power, so you got to rebate us that, or anything like that? Does that come up in your negotiations with them?
It does. I'd say actually people are usually surprised how negligible the cost of electricity and water is, so it's not really a negotiation point. Yeah, it's not much of an issue for us, mainly because these aren't, you're not talking about a big warehouse, and if you're doing this with a lot of production, yeah, of course there's a lot of consumption there, but it's such a small amount. Like they're throwing in refrigerator units constantly. This uses less power than that, and so usually they have capacity for this kind of things.
Yeah, at In-House Produce, our business model was to lease the system and then provide everything included in that package: the system, the seeds, the maintenance, the service that came along with it. But our customers did pay for their own power and water, and we put sensors on those to see how much water, how much power we were using. And I was also surprised how negligible it was, in part because you're already in an air-conditioned building. And so, I think a lot of people here are talking about vertical farms, and greenhouses, how much energy they use. And, what was really interesting is it's a business model where you don't pay for power, you don't pay for water. In your case, Alex, you don't pay for labor. So it can be a very different approach and potentially very different unit economics. But do we have more questions from the audience? All right. Well, then I'm just going to call on Steve Ritz, because you do on-location growing in schools, and I kind of want to hear, your 2 cents on this panel was supposed to be about grocery stores, hotels, and restaurants, but I want to hear about it in schools for a minute.
Well, right now, there is so much excitement around growing in schools. One, there's just excitement about being back to school. There's so much awareness around nutrition in school. There's so much emphasis on both project-based learning, which is what all of this is at the time, and emotional learning, turning something from seed to harvest. So it's time for the entire industry. I get jazzed up about it. I'm sorry I was busy tweeting about you guys, so you caught me with my head down. But thanks for all you do, and I'm excited about potential partnerships, as some of you already know.
Thank you. I have a question. So we all know about InFarm, right? So InFarm also has kiosks? Am I correct on
Yeah,
that?
do we have InFarm in the room? I'd love to hear your perspective on it. We got a 5-minute warning.
5-minute warning.
Yep.
So InFarm also put kiosks in stores, however, they grow remotely, is that right?
Do we have someone in the room
I don't
from
know.
InFarm?
InFarm's not here, are they? No, we don't. So that's a open
That is my
question.
understanding, Jim. Do you guys have a different
I
understanding?
mean, I'm not going to speak for them, but I think that they do a distributed system where they're pre-growing elsewhere at higher density, and then they do a grow out on site.
Do you like that model, Andrew?
I think it's cool. I'm into it. I'm into all sorts of things, and I think that it's important that we grow in any sort of way. I think that growing leafy greens at smaller scale in grocery stores is a tough sell, kind of like what you encountered. Mushrooms are very special in that they are usually a higher value product. You get higher yield per square foot, and so the unit economics make a little more sense. But I think that they've obviously figured something out. Their technology is pretty cool. It looks beautiful in person if you've ever seen it, and so I'm all about it. I think that while I'll talk all day about how mushrooms will change someone to be a mushroom person, seeing your leafy greens grown on site in front of you will also change you and potentially get you to be excited about fresh mint and leafy greens and all that kind of stuff.
What is the most rewarding thing you guys have? Oh, sorry. If you guys want to respond to the InFarm thing, go ahead, and then I'll ask my last question.
Short comment on that. So we have actually done ourselves that we pre-grow the seedlings, and then we put those on a cabinet in supermarket. It works. You have much more flow through from the cabinet compared to actually growing from the beginning. But the challenge is that when you have seedlings and you have to transport seedlings, you have to package them really well, and it's difficult to maintain the quality throughout the whole chain. So that's one challenge with that model.
Alex, do you send seedlings?
Yeah, I'd add, I think InFarm's fantastic for on-site farming, right? They've proven that there's a model and a space for this. I watch with great interest the success they're having in grocery. It's not something we do, right? We've solved very different problems for food service and for kind of on-site B2B farming. And so we're just relying on that different distribution model and different service model. So I watch them in awe, and I wish them well, but we'll keep doing what we're doing on the food service side.
Good stuff. We have one last question here.
Alex, do you get involved with the permitting process, or do you get involved with the permitting process, or do your customers do that on their own?
So we don't really have a permitting process for our units, as in we do have various food safety certifications that we've gone through, but the units themselves are wheel in, wheel out. They install in under an hour, so we don't have zoning for them. It's actually a big advantage over other methods like container farming.
So my last question's a real quick one. What's your favorite product that you've grown, or favorite installation that you've created?
Well, my favorite product is probably stevia. That's interesting.
Stevia is the sweetener.
Sweetener, yeah.
Okay, he likes it sweet.
So yeah.
Szechuan buttons for me, and our favorite installation, we ran a farm that's about 500 square feet at the Boar's Head Resort, sort of a demonstration of our back of house production in this old historic building that's still going today. So super cool historic application, but also a great proof of concept for this kind of back house front house. It's my favorite install.
And Szechuan buns, I don't know that I've heard of that one, so I'm going to try something out of a microfarm sometime soon.
I mean, it depends on the week, but I really like royal trumpets. I think that they're really, really easy to incorporate into people's diets. And so I think if any of you are on the fence about mushrooms, you should try them out. Use a lot of butter, but they'll be pretty good. But you know, we've built these things in all sorts of places. One of my favorite places is a place called Mesanyaki in Brooklyn. It's this cool like yakitori French fusion sort of thing, but they have a mushroom farm that's hanging above the bar. They pick the mushrooms off, put them on skewers, and put them over fire and serve them to you. It's a pretty cool experience. And so if any of you are ever in Brooklyn, you should go and check that out.
Well, I think that's an awesome way to end it with that visual of just floating mushroom farm, and there's the future for you right there, people. You heard it here first at Indoor AgCon. So thanks so much. Thanks to our
Thank you
panelists.
guys. Thank you so much. Hey guys, we got one more panel coming up, the seed panel. So